It all happened really quickly. One minute I was going to my local secondary school and moaning about how much work we had to do, and then suddenly the whole family was on a plane to the USA because my dad got transferred. I was faced with the prospect of starting a completely new school mid-term. I know a lot of people would have been excited about moving to another country, but I like my routine, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to stay in touch with all my mates. Luckily, that didn't happen, and I've kept in contact with a lot of them. And I got used to things pretty quickly, too. At least the Americans don't speak a different language.
I must admit, I like a challenge, and taking up a new job in Italy certainly offered me a big one. A lot of people I know wouldn't fancy being uprooted like this, but I've moved to different hospitals in different countries a fair few times over the last few years, so it's not a big upheaval to me. I'm not married, so I don't have a family to consider. I was actually looking forward to meeting new people and finding out about the different work ethics and practices. I think it's fascinating to see how people approach things in different ways all round the world.
I'd been expecting a lot of changes. It's inevitable when you go off to a completely different learning environment, but this was a bit of a shock to the system. The good thing was the brilliant food, even though it was a bit pricey. But there was a downside. In the UK, I'd been used to lying in until pretty late in the mornings. I have to say that I never turned up for 9 o'clock lectures, but no one made any fuss about it. In France, that was absolutely impossible. They expect full classes every day, and you get a reprimand if you're even 5 minutes late. I had to set the alarm for 7 o'clock. It took me a while to get used to that.
When we moved to France for 2 years back in 2010 because of my work in a school over there, people had told me that I'd really noticed the difference. But to be honest, it was nowhere near as bad as we'd thought. OK, some things were a bit more expensive, but then others were cheaper, and it all balanced out, really. Many of the English people we met there felt the same. And petrol gets you a lot further over there, so we could travel around a lot without worrying about the price of fuel. Pity to come back, really.
Setting up a business in another country is not an easy thing to do. As you can imagine, there's a lot to get your head round, especially all the legal aspects and the finances. As well as buying the business, it costs a lot to move the family too. Looking back, I think it's the best decision I've ever made, but it didn't seem like that at the time. Understanding what people were saying to me all the time was hard and caused a few difficulties. But I employed local staff as waiters, and they helped a lot. We managed okay, and it turned out to be a great success. Plenty of my friends from England have come out to stay, and they love it here. I haven't looked back.
Tommy Wells, the famous TV and film star, is a local boy who grew up in Marchwood. He's back here to do some filming, and we thought we'd have a chat to see what he thinks of the place now. Tommy, welcome to the programme.
Thanks. First off, I must say it's great to be back in this part of the country again. You won't believe it, but it's the first time I've been back since I left to go to drama school in London at the end of the 80s. People say that I must have some things I want to hide from my teenage years here, but to be honest, that isn't the case. Although I was by no means an angel. It's just that my immediate family moved to Scotland, so there was no real reason to come back.
Surely you must have had friends in the area.
Most of my mates I really valued moved on, like me. I was starting a new life, and when people do that, they often cut off their links to their old life. In my case, it was because I became famous very quickly, and fame affects people. I had new friends and a new home and a new life. I don't think I was a very nice person at that time, but I grew out of it, luckily.
So, now you're back, I imagine you've noticed a lot of changes in the area.
Oh, absolutely. Marchwood, where as you say I lived and went to school, is almost unrecognisable. It's still a fairly small town, but it's now totally pedestrianised. I tried to drive through the centre the other day. Impossible. And all the family shops like the old butchers and bakers, and of course the sweet shop, they've all gone.
Is your old family home still standing?
You must be joking. We used to live in this road of big old houses with lovely gardens. They've all been knocked down and replaced with boring blocks of flats and retirement homes. Now one plot of land houses 100 people, whereas before it was just one family. And it's sad to see car parks where there used to be gardens and grass.
And how about the places where you used to play as a kid?
Yeah, we used to hang out in the local park and practice our football skills. That's gone. And free outdoor tennis courts where we used to practice too. It's a mini shopping mall now. Great for the locals to get their shopping without having to travel too far, but where do the kids play now? And how about the people with dogs? I imagine they have to walk them along the streets.
It's a real shame, I know. The village hall is gone too. I remember reading that you did your first stage performance there, is that right?
How could I forget that? Yeah, my English teacher thought I had some talent, so he pushed me to join the local drama group. I must admit, I wasn't too keen. I'd rather have been chilling out with my mates. But my parents thought it would prevent me from misbehaving, so they encouraged me too. The first play I did was an Agatha Christie murder play, and I had 2 lines.
And what about your old school? Is that a lot different now?
I drove past it yesterday. It is so different. In my day, the kids were always breaking the windows, and although there was a playing field, there were none of those lovely gardens with trees and plants. Before, the kids would have pulled up any flowers. Now the buildings are new and modern, and the gardens at the entrance look beautiful. I'm not sure if they've still got the playing field, because I know a lot of them have been sold off, but people have told me that the reputation of the school has improved since I was there.
You hear a woman talking about telling jokes.
That was so funny. But you're really good at telling jokes, much better than me. My brother's away at college at the moment, and he keeps sending me loads on email. And I read them, laugh a bit, and file them away, so I've got quite a few in my head. But when I try to tell one, it never sounds very funny. I guess you need to be a bit of an actor, don't you? OK, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Have you heard the one about...
You hear a man talking about writing books. I know I'm getting on. 93 next birthday. But that hasn't stopped me learning about new technology and things. I might be a bit slow, but I'm pretty good at writing on my laptop. I started writing historical novels about 10 years ago. I know, a bit of a late starter. And I'm on my 3rd one now. I haven't had any success getting the first 2 published yet, but you never know. I usually write them out by hand first, and then type them up. My wife says it keeps me out of trouble. Would you like to read one? You hear 2 people talking about children's books.
Well, it's an interesting question, and not that easy to remember. I had a lot of favourites, but I'm not sure which I'd put first. How about you?
It was a mystery story, a sort of adventure about 5 kids that went on a camping holiday. No idea who the author was, but I remember being really excited by it. So, what are you going to write about?
Probably one of the Alice books. I can say a lot about how they impress me. We don't have to hand it in till next week, so I can spend some more time thinking back.
I think I'll start mine as soon as I get home. These things take me ages. Look, the bell's going to go in a minute. Let's meet up at break tomorrow and chat about our ideas.
You hear 2 people talking about a new drama series.
I just love this new drama series on Sundays. Like you, I read the book years ago, but I can't remember what happened at the end. Is Grant really a ghost?
I'm not telling you. But I agree it's good.
I was a bit worried that they'd praised it too much in the previews and that I'd be disappointed when I came to watch it. But it is every bit as good as the critics said. It leaves you at such an exciting point each week that it makes you really want to watch the next one.
Very true. Mind you, Angela Watson as the teacher is so scary I thought I'd have nightmares.
You hear a voicemail message about a new job.
Hi, it's Janine. Good news, I got my first job as a voiceover artist. I'm due to record some reading books for blind people later this month. I've just read through one of them, and it's a simplified version of a crime novel. I think it will be a really good book to listen to, very exciting. I was wondering if you'd let me practice reading it to you, and give me any advice. You're so experienced at this sort of thing. I'll be at home this evening if you're free to give me a call.
You hear a woman talking about a lie she told.
OK, if we're talking about lies that we're ashamed of, then I've got a big one. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I told my mum a really big lie when I was a teenager. I had been really into swimming, competitions and everything, but I was getting a bit fed up with it by the time I was 16. There were more interesting things to do, so when she thought I was going to training sessions after school every Thursday, really I was missing them and hanging out with my mates in town. She carried on paying for lessons for a whole term before she found out. That's terrible, isn't it?
You hear two people talking about a writing competition.
Have you heard back from the judges in the short story competition yet?
No, not yet. Have you?
No, but I'm a bit worried about it. I don't think I'll do very well. I only left myself a couple of days to do it. I didn't want to miss the deadline and I rushed it a bit.
Even so, you're bound to win one of the prizes. You've got such a great imagination.
Thanks. I enjoyed writing it, even though it wasn't my favourite topic, but I don't think it was the best I've done. Whereas yours was brilliant. I couldn't put it down.
You hear a voicemail message.
I recently booked tickets to see a performance of Romeo and Juliet at the Lyndhurst Theatre. I did the booking online and made the payment online too, which was relatively straightforward. And although I was worried that the tickets might not arrive in time, I got them very quickly. However, I was upset to discover that the main role wasn't being played by Lauren Hunter because she was on holiday. Couldn't this information have been put on the website before I and many others booked to see the play?
OK, so you want to be a writer. Well, it's an interesting life, although not necessarily an easy one, and I can tell you that from experience. The most important thing a new writer needs is passion. You must really want to write. It's not something you think you might do if you've got some free time just to get a bit of extra money. In my case, I've wanted to be a writer all my life, ever since I read my first book, The Castle, when I was 5 years old. It was a simple kid's adventure story, but it gave me a love of storytelling, and the first book of mine to be published, Rainbows, was an adventure story too, with a touch of romance. However, I have to warn you that it can be really hard to get your first book accepted by a publisher. Some authors I know got as many as 20 rejection letters when they first started sending their manuscripts out. Fortunately, I was rejected only 3 times before finally finding a publisher. This whole process can be very depressing, and unless you have a lot of confidence in your book, it might put some writers off. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the life of a writer. Obviously, everyone is different and has their own way of doing things, but don't be fooled into believing that it's a glamorous or romantic life. Authors are actually quite down to earth, and they have to be organised. I have to stick to the same routine each day to be able to meet my deadlines. I can't just write when I feel like it. I have to write a set number of words a day, and when I'm feeling tired or want to go out with a friend, I have to be firm with myself. I set aside 4 hours every morning for writing, from 8 to 12, and during that time no one interrupts me, on pain of death. I don't work afternoons. Well, I do, in a way. Afternoons are for relaxing, going for walks, meeting friends, but it's also my thinking time. I get ideas when I'm out walking or even chatting in a cafe. Weekends are work-free too. Occasionally I might have a book signing session at a shop or library somewhere, but I try to keep weekends as family time. Now, the writing itself. A lot of writers these days create directly onto the computer. It's quick and easy, and you can edit with no problem. But personally, I find that I work better if I write out my first drafts the old-fashioned way, and I use a fountain pen that I was given by a famous author once. I have to keep filling it with ink when I'm writing, but I love it. Then, of course, I type it up on the computer and change things as I go. You may find you have a different system. There's one author I know who still uses an old typewriter. Something I'm often asked about is writer's block. Whether sometimes I just run out of ideas. And oh yes, it does happen. It is so frustrating because I nearly always get it just before an important deadline. In a way, it's the deadline that causes it. The worry and panic of meeting the deadline can make my brain freeze. If that happens, I find that the best way to deal with it is to relax and not try to force the ideas. That just makes it worse. My advice to writers is to do something different for a while, like go for a walk or watch a film. I'm afraid I've run out of time today, but if you're interested in hearing more, a new documentary about different writers and their working lives will go out on Channel 3 next month. Originally 5 of us were going to be taking part, but unfortunately I had to pull out, so it'll be just 4. However, I can highly recommend it. All the authors are good friends of mine and are exceptionally talented. And as always, you can contact me directly on my website. Thank you for listening today.
My mum's sister, Aunt Susan, married young, in her late teens, and everyone in the family said it wouldn't last and predicted a divorce by the time she was 21. But she seemed to prove them all wrong, and her relationship with her husband, Gary, looked very stable for 10 years or so. And then, just after their 10th anniversary, he left her for his secretary. Apparently, they'd been having an affair for the previous 5 years. Susan was devastated and went to pieces for about 6 months. She never remarried and brought up their 2 daughters on her own. But she's doing amazingly well now and always has a smile. She's my favourite relative.
My sister Jenny was brilliant at school. I guess I was slightly envious, to tell the truth, particularly because my parents were continually boasting about what a good lawyer she was going to make. And sure enough, she easily got a first in her law degree and a top job with a law firm. Last year, however, she left her highly paid job to go to work on a farm in Scotland. She'd always loved the open air and animals, but she'd been hesitant about going into that type of work because she never wanted to let anyone down. It's good to see her so happy these days. Oddly enough, I graduate in law myself next month, and I'm really looking forward to working in the profession.
I love going on holiday with the family and have very fond memories of time spent on campsites. Unfortunately, my 2 sisters are married with their own families now, so we don't get together in the same way anymore. I used to have a lot of respect for my eldest sister, because when we were away somewhere new, she would always go out and explore the place, sometimes on her own. I thought she'd give my mother a heart attack one day. I was always much less adventurous. The funny thing is that now she has a really boring, unexciting job in an office, and I'm the one who travels all over the place. You'd think it would be the other way round, wouldn't you?
Whenever I've had problems about relationships, studies, or even once when I got into debt, I haven't taken my worries to my parents. It's not easy to say why, perhaps because they've had their own problems to deal with. Instead, I usually go to my cousin Katie. She's 10 years older than me, and I've always looked up to her. She's always got time for me and doesn't have to rush off somewhere like the rest of my family. And she manages to talk me through the best ways to deal with things without making me feel like I've done something wrong or stupid for not sorting myself out in the first place.
Most teenagers want an easy life. Study, relax and sleep. Lots of sleep. I know that I did. My aim was to get good grades at school so that I could get a good job with a high salary and enough time to chill out with my friends. But this isn't enough for my niece. She's doing extremely well academically, but she's also pushed herself to the limit to reach the top in her chosen sport, swimming. She's done it too. National champion last year. It's taken a lot of sacrifices and determination, and the poor girl has no social life. But it's what's important to her, and I respect her for it.
There has been a lot on the news recently about people cutting down protected trees. Gail Simpson has experienced this firsthand. Gail, how worrying is this? I mean, we're talking about trees here. It's not really a life and death situation, is it?
I think it's too easy for people to feel that way. Trees are a very low priority for people, but they would definitely notice them if they weren't there. Of course, trees get cut down all the time, to build new houses, roads, for fuel, for furniture even. So no, their lives can't be compared to a person's, if that's what you mean. But they do have a real significance to us. Wouldn't you much rather live in an area where there are trees and grass? They add value to our lives in lots of ways. I worry that we're going to lose this.
What value are you talking about?
Well, there's the obvious financial value, because a house with a garden and trees, or even a house in a tree-lined street, is more expensive than a flat in a tower block. We must also remember that trees take carbon dioxide out of the air to help us breathe. But those are different questions. What I'm really talking about is being able to look out of your window onto a garden and see trees. It's calming and relaxing. Imagine seeing nothing but buildings for mile after mile.
Yes, I see your point. So tell us about your particular problem with trees, Gail.
Well, my husband and I live on the coast, looking out across the beach. We used to live in London, but decided to move to this area because of the view, and because it's very quiet, apart from the summer when we get lots of tourists. But it's beautiful, and my husband's a keen fisherman. He takes people out fishing in his boat every fortnight. An added bonus is that the house has a lovely garden with some old oak trees and a huge Scots pine.
And as far as I understand, the trees in your particular area are protected, aren't they?
That's right. When they started to develop the area and build houses and roads here, most of the few remaining trees, mainly the oak trees and Scots pines, were given protection. This is to keep the place looking natural, and also to help other species. If you think about it, so many insects, birds, small mammals, plants and so on depend on trees. This protection means that it is against the law to cut down any of these trees. If you do, you can be prosecuted.
So tell us what happened last year, Gail.
It was in September, just after the last tourists had gone. I came down one morning to make breakfast and looked out of the window, and I got the shock of my life. The big Scots pine on the very edge of our front garden was gone. There was just a stump sticking out of the ground. The evening before it had been there, and that morning it had disappeared. I would have immediately suspected my next-door neighbour, but he was away on holiday.
And why would you have thought it was him?
The tree was blocking his view of the sea, and he'd asked us several times about cutting it down. And it was him. Later we found out that he'd hired someone to cut it down while he was away. And what a dangerous thing to do! This was a really tall tree. He was fined £50,000. That's how much value he added to the house by having a sea view.
An expensive tree. I imagine you and your neighbour are not the best of friends?
We didn't used to talk to him very much anyway, but thankfully he doesn't live here anymore. Immediately after the court case, my husband asked him for an apology, but he wouldn't give one. It's difficult to live next door to someone who can do something like that. Fortunately, our other neighbours are really nice people who respect the trees in our area.
You hear a woman talking about a recent holiday.
And then he handed me my birthday card, and inside were tickets for a weekend in Paris. For that night. I couldn't believe it. He's never done anything like that before. He's always been so predictable. He'd actually wanted to pack for me as well, and take me straight to the airport from work. I'm glad my friend Claire told him that I wouldn't have been happy with that. Can you imagine someone else packing your clothes? Also, I don't usually like doing things at the last minute as I tend to get stressed, but he'd clearly organised everything so I wasn't at all worried, and it all went very smoothly. It was great.
You hear someone talking about an upgrade on a flight.
I usually get fed up on the long flight to New York, but last week I got another free upgrade to first class. Remember it happened the last time I flew there? I certainly never thought I'd get lucky a second time. It makes such a difference to the journey. I wonder how they choose who to upgrade. I know they do it when the plane isn't full, and I could see in the departure lounge that there weren't that many people. Maybe it's to do with how smart you look, and I was wearing my business suit, not my jeans as I normally do for a flight.
You hear someone talking about a tourist site.
If you look over there in a moment, you can see Stonehenge, a huge circle of big stones. See where I'm pointing? They're set back from the road, so it's easy to see them as we go past. Tourists aren't allowed to go up and touch them these days, but I remember when I was a kid we could. They're quite something, aren't they? The big mystery is how they were transported here. Oh, good, he's slowing down for us. That's nice of him. You can get a good long look at them. All we need now is a guide to tell us a bit about the history.
You hear someone talking about meeting a famous person.
We had a brilliant time, but the highlight of the holiday for me was when I saw Red. You know, the lead singer from Forest. She was in the hotel reception when we checked in.
You lucky thing. I'd love to meet her. Is she as pretty as she looks on TV?
Oh, yeah, but TV makes her look much taller than she really is. I was amazed at how tiny she is. I knew it was her immediately, because all that red hair really makes her stand out in the crowd. I started to speak to her, but I didn't really know what to say. You know what I'm like. I just blushed. The same colour as her hair.
You hear two people talking about a new car.
Wow, nice car. That must have cost a fortune.
Yeah, it wasn't cheap, but with my new position at the bank, I can afford to drive one of these now.
I didn't know you'd been promoted. I've missed so much news being in the USA.
Mum should have told you. It happened last month. A nice pay rise. If you need a loan or anything, just ask me. I can help you out now.
What you can do is give me a ride home in your new car. Would that be okay?
You hear someone talking about commuting to work every day.
Since we've moved out of London, we've really appreciated the peace and quiet, and it's not as expensive as I thought it would be to travel into the city every day for work. A 6-month season ticket is about £1,500, which I don't think is too bad. I don't like travelling when the trains are completely full, so to avoid that, I have to get up about 6:30. It's earlier than I'd like, as I need my sleep. Also, I don't have time for breakfast with the kids, but if it means I can get a seat, then it's worth it.
You hear someone talking on the radio.
Would you like to go on a holiday with a difference? Something you'll be able to remember for the rest of your life? Well, if you saved up hard or maybe won the lottery, you might be able to afford a ticket for the journey of a lifetime, into space. In the meantime, tonight at 6:30, you can hear from people who have done just that and want to share their experiences. Don't miss out on this opportunity to hear all about that sensation of being in zero gravity. Listen in to special moments this evening, and perhaps you'll soon be reaching for the stars yourself.
You hear someone talking about taking the school bus when he was at school.
One of the biggest moments in a kid's life is when they move up to secondary school. I remember it particularly because it meant I got to travel on a school bus with all my mates instead of in my mum's car. In my eyes, at the age of 11, only babies went in with their parents. Mind you, it wasn't so good standing around in the cold at the bus stop every morning. And it was a long journey too, because the bus picked up kids from all round the area. But we filled the time chatting and playing jokes. It was great.
Today, I'd like to tell you a little about one of my favourite authors. He has a special place in my heart because the first book I ever read that didn't have pictures in was one of his. I was 9 years old when I was captivated by the book The Lost World, which is an exciting adventure story set in South America. However, the writer is famous to most of us for a different type of book completely. Detective stories. And I'm sure you all know about them. Is the name Sherlock Holmes familiar to you? Of course it is. Holmes is undoubtedly one of the most famous fictional detectives there has ever been. Since the first mystery, A Study in Scarlet, was published in 1887, the stories of Sherlock Holmes have both delighted readers and inspired many crime writers. Even popular writers today in the 21st century say how much Sherlock Holmes and his methods of investigating have influenced their own writing. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, whose parents were Irish, was born in Scotland, but spent most of his life in the southeast of England. He was trained as a doctor, but turned to writing when his medical practice failed to do very well. He said that the main inspiration for his writing was his mother. She had an amazing ability to tell stories. Doyle also loved the mysteries of the American writer Edgar Allan Poe, and some people compare Holmes with Poe's French detective Dupin. The success of his first few stories encouraged Doyle to continue writing, and by the time he died in 1930, he had written 56 short stories and 4 novels about the famous detective. However, his writing was not restricted to stories about his most famous character. Doyle also wrote over 115 short stories which did not include Sherlock. As well as reading about him, we can also see Sherlock Holmes in many films and TV series. Recently, an even newer audience has had the chance to follow his adventures in 2 new cinema adaptations. There have also been new TV series that bring the stories up to date in the 21st century. Their adventures are based on the real stories, but they live and work in modern-day cities. Although the Sherlock Holmes stories were very successful, Conan Doyle's real love was history, and he wanted to be known as a serious writer of historical fiction. He killed his famous detective in the story The Final Problem, but his readers complained, and eventually he brought Sherlock back 10 years later in The Adventure of the Empty House, with an explanation about why he hadn't really died. Conan Doyle was interested in real-life mysteries too. He was a member of the Ghost Club, which was an organisation that investigated reports of strange sights or sounds that couldn't be explained. He believed that it was possible to contact and speak to dead people, and in 1920 he published an article with a photograph of a young child in a garden with fairies. However, many years later, the child in the photo admitted that it was all a big trick. Doyle died in 1930 after a heart attack at the age of 71. He was first buried in the rose garden of his home. Later, however, his body was moved to a churchyard in the New Forest. His greatest creation was Sherlock Holmes, and I am convinced that the detective will continue to excite audiences for many years to come.
In our series of interviews this week about crime fighters, we've spoken to police officers and welfare officers. Today, I'm talking to someone who's actually been in prison and is now helping fight crime himself, Thomas Barker. Thomas, you started breaking the law when you were very young. Can you tell us why?
I know it's common for people who've gone bad to blame their family and their upbringing, but quite honestly, I can't really do that. My parents weren't very rich, but they both worked hard, and they didn't row much. They had time for me, and I respected them. I have 2 brothers who have never broken the law in their lives, so I don't think there was anything wrong with my home life.
So, if it wasn't that, what was it?
I think it was the friends I had at school. Before I started school, I was a little angel. Then I suppose I fell in with a bad crowd. And these were kids at primary school, about 10 years old. But these kids were very persuasive. They used to shoplift sweets and drinks from the local newsagents. And because I didn't want to be different, I did the same. We got away with it, so we did it again and again, at a load of different shops. Although it was quite risky, we never got caught.
And this continued at secondary school?
Yes, it started to get more serious then. By the time I was 14, I was part of a big gang. We weren't in it for bags of sweets or packets of crisps then. It became more organised. We'd watch people's homes for a few days, then break in and steal money when we knew they'd be out for a while. It became really exciting. Somehow it never crossed my mind that the police would find us. We also took valuables like jewellery and watches and sold them on to real criminals.
You say real criminals. You didn't think that you were a real criminal yourself?
Not at the time. I suppose I thought it was still a big game. We were getting loads of cash out of it, but it was more like playing at being a criminal than being a real one. But that all changed when one of the guys got violent. We were burgling an old lady's house, and we didn't know it, but she was still at home, and came at us with an umbrella. We panicked, and one of my mates pushed her over, and she hit her head. She was hurt quite badly. We got caught, and I ended up doing a stretch in prison.
And how did that affect you?
I think I was in shock for about 6 months. It had all been fun and an easy way to make money and buy stuff we wanted, and then suddenly there I was in prison. Looking back, I'm really glad we were caught. It brought me to my senses. In prison, I had time to think, and I knew I had to change. It's not easy in there. You're surrounded by guys who have done some bad things, and a lot of them are forming new relationships to help them commit more crimes when they get out.
Were you helped at all while you were in prison to prepare for life when you got out?
Well, at school I hadn't done well. I hadn't wanted to study or get any qualifications. But in prison they encouraged me to take exams, and by the time I came out, I was a qualified car mechanic. They got me a part-time job to go to when I was released too, so I have a lot to thank them for. It meant it was much more unlikely that I would ever go back to my previous life. Luckily, my parents were happy to have me home. However, I wouldn't have blamed them if they'd shut the door on me.
And you're helping to change lives yourself, aren't you?
I hope so. I'm involved with a volunteer program to try to help youngsters who are in trouble and maybe in with the wrong crowd. I go to youth clubs and schools and talk about my own experiences and how and why I've changed. I think it helps for them to hear from someone who's been through the things that they might be going through themselves. I wish there had been someone to help me out when I was at that stage.
Well, congratulations on doing a great job, Thomas, and we wish you all the best.
You hear a man talking about his work.
I hadn't intended to spend my days working in other people's gardens. In fact, I trained to become an accountant, but I soon discovered that I wasn't really suited to office life. It's not a healthy lifestyle, really, being inside all the time, sitting at a desk all day. So I packed it in and started doing odd jobs for people in their gardens to earn some extra money while I thought about what to do next. I needed to get out in the fresh air for a change. I really love that side of the job. Plus, I've developed very strong muscles in my back. One downside is working in bad weather, but the benefits more than make up for that.
You hear a man telling someone about getting lost.
You're late. We were expecting you back ages ago. You must be exhausted.
And wet. It was supposed to be a short walk in the forest before lunch, and then the fog came down and I got completely lost. It can be quite frightening when you're a stranger in a place, but I know the area well, and it was just a matter of waiting for a while until it cleared. I must admit it was a bit of an adventure trying to guess the right way in the fog. Quite thrilling, really. I just hope it hasn't spoiled dinner. I get really irritated when people turn up late, so sincere apologies for that.
You hear two people talking at a zoo. The penguins have got so much more space than I remember they had when I came here before.
Yes, that's good. But I'm still not sure it's good to keep them like this. I know it's good for kids to see them here and learn more about animals that they wouldn't normally see. But I still get a bit upset when I see the monkeys looking through the cage bars at me. It gets me down.
But just think, a lot of these animals would be extinct if there weren't places like this. Having visitors like us helps pay for them to live.
I suppose they don't have any worries and get looked after well.
You hear a woman talking about a sport.
I first started sailing when I was about 10, and I've been racing in club competitions ever since. I thoroughly enjoy getting soaking wet on a cold, windy day, although a lot of my friends think I'm totally mad. The sailing club offers a great social life too, and I met my future husband there when we were both 19. I've won nearly every competition I've entered over the last couple of years, but I've just been made redundant, and I don't think we'll be able to afford to sail competitively for much longer. It's a pity because it's a healthy way to spend your free time, but I suppose I'll just have to find another, cheaper sport to do.
You hear a voicemail message.
Hi, just to say that I hope you have a really good, relaxing break in Scotland. It's not the best time of year to choose to go there, but you definitely need the break. I wish you wouldn't work so hard. If you worked fewer days a week, perhaps we would see you more often. At least we'll have a good time together when you come home for Christmas. I've already got your old bedroom ready for you. But anyway, please take care and remember to pack some thick jumpers. Give me a ring when you get there, and don't even think about work. They'll survive without you.
You hear a man talking about recent flooding.
It's unbelievable. The last time this happened, the council assured us all that they would build special defences to prevent flooding if the River Maris burst its banks again. Did they do it? No. Everyone knows that it's an expensive thing to do, but we pay money to the council every year. They can afford it. And when we are flooded, it costs us a fortune. Last year, all the houses in this road were a metre deep in water. Today, it's the same. This must never happen again.
You hear the following on the radio.
This hot, dry summer has been a bonus for the tourist industry in our area. People have crowded the beaches, and seaside hotels have reported their best figures for at least 5 years. Inevitably, though, the hot weather has not been welcomed by everyone. Elderly people suffer badly in the heat, and there have been several deaths during the heat wave. It is very important that older people drink enough water. Also, those of you with dogs must remember never to leave them in cars with closed windows. And to get an update on the weather, let's go over to Katie.
You hear a woman talking to her friend.
For me, it's the perfect part-time job. I'm married with kids who go to school, so taking other people's dogs for walks during the day suits me well. It's also great exercise and keeps me fit. I'm not sure if it's the right job for everyone, because obviously you need to love dogs, and also you need to be able to deal with the more difficult ones properly. Dog walking is not good for people who don't like the rain and cold. Dogs need walking whether it's boiling hot, freezing cold, or pouring with rain. So it's important to think it through and not to agree to something that you might later regret.
I've always loved my food, but I never learnt how to cook properly myself when I was young. I suppose I just got used to having meals put in front of me by my very kind mother, who is also the world's best cook. But all that changed when I left home to study at university in the north of England, and I had to look after myself. What I did was, I downloaded lots of recipes from the internet, and I'm gradually working my way through them. And I'm doing pretty well. There have been a few minor disasters, like leaving things in the oven for too long, but generally speaking, I'm getting the hang of it, and my flatmates agree.
Cooking became a hobby of mine when I was quite young, and what I loved to do was make up new meals with unusual ingredients. I used to practice on my friends, and perhaps they were being polite, but they seemed to enjoy them. The family wasn't always so keen. My mother prefers me to cook traditional meals, even now that I'm trained and run a restaurant of my own. Today, I still use unusual combinations of flavours. I must admit, I have invented a couple of dishes where the mix wasn't quite right, but you soon learn from your mistakes, don't you?
I was definitely born with a sweet tooth, and that's probably why I've focused on baking cakes in my career. It means I can eat as many as I like. Strangely enough, I don't overdo it, and all the running around that I do, cooking and delivering, keeps my weight down. I learnt most of the recipes I use from my mum, but obviously I've added to them over the years by listening to TV chefs and collecting recipe books. An important piece of advice I can pass on after many years of experience is never to rush baking. I used to try to do things quickly and something always went wrong. Also, get the oven temperature right, otherwise your cakes will sink.
We had to have cookery classes at school, and I didn't enjoy them much. The teacher taught us a lot about nutrition and healthy eating, and that was really interesting. But when it came to the practical sessions, my efforts were usually disasters. Once I made a curry and put in too much chili pepper. My mum tasted it and then had to run for a big glass of water. She couldn't speak for about an hour. Things didn't get any better with meals I tried to cook after I left school, and as a result, I decided to give up cooking. Sandwiches and takeaway meals are fine for me now.
I got married last year, and before that I had never cooked a meal. My mum had tried to teach me basic recipes, but I just wasn't interested. However, when I got married, I thought I ought to make an effort, and I did try. Unfortunately, I was a complete disaster in the kitchen. The meals turned out either tasteless or too salty, and I couldn't manage to cook anything without leaving nearly every pan in the kitchen dirty. I was quite happy to continue trying, but my husband eventually got fed up with eating my horrible food and cleaning up after me. And now he does all the cooking. He's a natural.